What happens when one of Britain's most beloved actors is pushed too far by a host who refuses to listen? In just under a minute, what should have been a light-hearted discussion about a new film turned into one of the most shocking walkouts in daytime television history. This is the story of how a seemingly harmless morning interview spiraled into a public clash, leaving the audience stunned and the actor no choice but to leave the studio. Bill Nighy entered the studio that morning like he had countless times before. Confident, composed, and in his signature suit, he smiled and waved to the audience, projecting the easy charm that had made him a household name. Today, he was here to talk about a labor of love, a small independent film he had spent 5 years developing. This was not just another project. It was a story he genuinely cared about, a story he had been eager to share with the world. At first, the interview proceeded as expected. Lorraine Kelly greeted him warmly, her usual charm on full display, welcoming the audience to what promised to be an engaging conversation. They exchanged pleasantries, discussed the weather, and shared light banter about Bill's journey to the studio. It all seemed normal, routine even. But as soon as the discussion turned to the film, the atmosphere shifted. Lorraine leaned forward, a slight frown crossing her otherwise friendly face. "So Bill," she began, her tone polite but tinged with skepticism, "I watched your new film last night, and I have to be honest, I'm a bit confused. Why would you choose to do something so small?" Bill maintained his polite smile, though a flicker of tension crossed his features. "It's a story I've wanted to tell for a long time," he replied carefully. "It's about." "You're Bill Nighy?" Lorraine interrupted, cutting him off mid-sentence. "You could be doing major Hollywood blockbusters, Marvel movies, films people actually want to see. Instead, you're doing this tiny little drama that hardly anyone has heard of." The studio fell silent. Bill shifted uncomfortably in his seat but spoke calmly. "I think there's real value in telling intimate stories. Not every project needs to be a blockbuster." Lorraine's expression hardened. "But don't you think you're wasting your talent? This film is only being released in about 20 theaters." 20. That's practically nothing. Bill's smile tightened, his voice gaining a subtle edge. "The size of the release doesn't determine the quality of the work," he said, measured but firm. "Maybe not," Lorraine replied, "but it does determine whether anyone will actually see it. Isn't the point of making films to reach people, or are you just making them for yourself now?" Her words carried a sharpness that made the audience shift uneasily. "I make films that matter to me," Bill responded, calm but increasingly resolute. "Films that say something worth saying." Lorraine waved her hand dismissively. "I just don't understand. At this stage in your career, you could literally do anything, and yet you choose this. Something nobody asked for?" Bill drew a slow breath. "Actually, quite a few people did ask for it. The director approached me 3 years ago with the script." Lorraine laughed incredulously. "The director?" "Yes, I looked her up. She's made what? 2 films before this, both unknown. So you're taking career advice from someone without a hit yet?" Bill was no longer smiling. "She's an incredibly talented filmmaker," he said quietly. Lorraine shook her head. "Talented? Come on, Bill. You've worked with Richard Curtis, John Madden. You've been part of major productions, and now you're working with someone nobody's heard of, on a film almost no one will see." The audience was completely silent now. Even the camera operators moved with cautious quiet. "You're being unfair," Bill said softly, his patience thinning. "Unfair?" Lorraine repeated, eyebrows raised. "I'm being honest. That's what we do here. Honest conversations. And honestly, I think you've been making some very questionable choices lately." Bill's jaw tightened. "Questionable choices?" "Yes," she pressed on. "You turned down that big Netflix series last year, the one that went to Hugh Grant. That would have been massive, millions of viewers. Instead, you're doing West End theater for 200 people a night, and now this little film. It's like you're deliberately choosing to become irrelevant." "I don't measure relevance by audience size," Bill replied, his tone sharper now. "Maybe you should?" Lorraine shot back. "Because the industry does, your agents do, the people who pay to see films do. And right now, you're basically invisible." "Invisible?" Bill repeated the word heavy with warning. Lorraine, sensing her momentum, pressed further. "Do you think you're too good for mainstream entertainment? Have you decided you're a serious artist now, and the rest of us are peasants who watch superhero movies?" Bill's expression hardened. "You didn't have to say it," he said quietly. But it's obvious from your choices, Lorraine insisted. You've become the kind of actor who thinks commercial success is beneath you. Popular films can't possibly be good, right? Bill leaned forward, his voice controlled but deadly serious. You're putting words in my mouth. Am I? Lorraine asked, leaning back. Because that's exactly what it looks like from here. At that moment, the tension in the studio became palpable. What had started as a friendly morning chat had escalated into a confrontation that would be remembered for years. Bill Nighy, cornered by assumptions and criticism, had finally reached the point where he could no longer tolerate the host's interrogation. In less than 40 seconds, he made the decision that would shock everyone. He walked out, leaving the audience and Lorraine speechless. You're making films for film festivals and critics instead of real audiences, Lorraine Kelly said, leaning forward, her tone sharp but measured. For real people. Hardworking people who just want to be entertained. Bill Nighy's expression remained calm, but there was a quiet steel beneath his voice. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be entertained, he said. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to make something meaningful. But your definition of meaningful seems to be anything that makes no money, and that hardly anyone watches. Lorraine's smile was tight, polite but edged with challenge. Help me understand that, she said. Bill closed his eyes for a brief moment, as if counting to 10. This film is about a man dealing with grief after losing his wife, he began. It's a very personal, very human story about love and loss, about finding a way forward. That's meaningful to me, and to everyone who worked on it. And I believe it will be meaningful to the people who see it. Even if that's only 12 people, Lorraine's voice rose incredulously.
What?
Bill's head snapped up. I said 12 people. The 12 people who will actually go see it in theaters before it disappears. She repeated louder, almost savoring the moment. The audience audibly gasped. Some even whispered. Bill stared at her, a mixture of disbelief and rising anger in his eyes. That's incredibly disrespectful, he said quietly, but firmly. Not just to me, but to everyone who worked on this film. Oh, I'm being disrespectful. Lorraine laughed lightly, though it held no warmth. Bill, I'm trying to have a real conversation. I want to understand why someone with your talent and opportunities is choosing to essentially hide from the public. I'm not hiding from anyone, Bill replied, his voice rising slightly. I'm here on your show, aren't I? I'm doing press. I'm putting myself out there because I believe in this film. I'm promoting it the way I always do. Then why? Lorraine pressed, her tone sharp and insistent. That's what I keep asking, and you keep dancing around it. Why this film? Why this director? Why these choices that make absolutely no sense? They make sense to me, Bill said, his voice calm but resolute. Well, they don't make sense to me, Lorraine countered, leaning in. And I think I speak for a lot of people when I say we miss the old Bill Nighy, the fun Bill Nighy. The Bill who did romantic comedies and made us smile. Not this pretentious version who's too cool for the room. Bill's patience snapped. He stood up abruptly in the middle of the interview. What are you doing? Lorraine asked, startled. I'm leaving, he said calmly. You can't leave! We're in the middle of an interview! She protested. No, Bill said firmly. You're in the middle of insulting me and everyone I work with. That's not an interview, that's an attack. Oh, come on, Lorraine said, waving a hand dismissively. Don't be so sensitive. I'm just asking questions. You're not asking questions? Bill shot back, his voice sharp now. You're making judgments. You're dismissing work you haven't given any real thought to. You're calling me pretentious and irrelevant, acting like commercial success is the only measure of worth. Lorraine's tone hardened. It's a pretty important measure. No, Bill said firmly. It's not. Not to me. Not to the people who made this film with me. And not to anyone who actually cares about storytelling rather than box office numbers. So, you're saying you're better than everyone else? She asked, triumphantly. That's not what I said, Bill replied, his voice rising. But you know what? I don't need to defend myself to you. I don't need to explain my choices to someone who clearly has no interest in understanding them. I have every interest, Lorraine protested. No, you don't, Bill said quietly, but with finality. You invited me here to promote a film, and instead you've spent the entire time telling me it's worthless, and that I'm wasting my time. Why would I stay for that? Because it's good television, Lorraine said with a shrug, That was it, that one line. The moment when Bill completely checked out. His eyes narrowed, his jaw tightened. Good television? He repeated quietly. Right? Well, I hope your ratings are worth it. Bill, sit down. Lorraine called, her voice now tense. Let's finish this properly. Finish what? Bill asked. You've made your point. You think I'm irrelevant and my film is pointless. Message received. I'm not going to sit here while you continue to tear down something I care about just for your entertainment. Our entertainment, Lorraine corrected. This isn't real conflict. Bill said. This is you being needlessly cruel because you think it makes good content. And I'm not interested in being part of it. He began to walk off the set. Lorraine's face flickered through surprise, anger, embarrassment, and panic. Bill, don't be ridiculous, she called. You're overreacting. He stopped and turned back. Am I? Let me ask you something, Lorraine. When was the last time you created anything? When did you put yourself out there with something you believed in, knowing it might fail? When did you take a risk because it mattered to you, not because it was safe or popular? Lorraine opened her mouth, but no words came out. Bill's gaze held hers. That's what I thought. It's easy to sit in that chair and criticize. It's much harder to actually make choices, put your heart into something, and hope people connect with it. At that moment, the studio was silent. The tension was palpable, and for the first time that morning, Bill Nighy's point had been made loud and clear. Some stories and some choices aren't meant for approval. They're meant for integrity. And you know what? Bill Nighy said, his voice calm but firm, cutting through the tension in the studio. Maybe this film won't be a huge success. Maybe only a few thousand people will see it. But those people will see something honest, something real, something made with care. And that, being honest and creating something meaningful, that's worth more to me than anything you've said today. Lorraine Kelly bristled defensively. I was just doing my job, she said. Your job is to interview people. Bill replied, his voice rising slightly, not to belittle them. There's a difference. One requires curiosity and respect. The other just requires cruelty, and you chose cruelty. With that he stood, his movements deliberate and controlled. He walked past the cameras, past the stunned crew, and out the door, leaving the studio in stunned silence. The audience was frozen, unsure how to react. Lorraine, for a brief moment, tried to recover, forcing a laugh as if to smooth over the chaos. Well, she said, that was unexpected. But the truth was evident in her eyes. She knew she had overstepped. She had pushed too hard. She had been so focused on creating a dramatic, viral moment that she forgot she was talking to a real person, a man who had spent decades building a career, making choices, creating art, someone who deserved basic respect. Instead, she had mocked him. She dismissed his work. She called him pretentious and irrelevant. She suggested he was wasting his talent, all because he had the audacity to choose projects he genuinely cared about instead of chasing the biggest paycheck or the widest audience. The reality is, Bill Nighy didn't need to be on that show. He had starred in dozens of beloved films. He had won awards. He had worked with the best directors in the business. He could probably never do another interview in his life and still be perfectly fine. And yet, he came on that show anyway. He came to promote a small, personal film, a project he poured his heart into, because he wanted people to know about it, to understand it, to see something he believed in. Lorraine, however, saw that vulnerability and used it to manufacture drama. She attacked him for his choices, questioned his judgment, and implied he was foolish for valuing anything beyond commercial success. That wasn't journalism. That wasn't entertainment. That was simply cruelty, and Bill recognized it immediately. He understood that his dignity and the integrity of the film and the people who made it were worth more than enduring an interview that had become nothing more than a public mockery. Bill walked away from a host who couldn't show basic professional courtesy, who couldn't conduct an interview without turning it into an attack, who valued viral moments over meaningful conversation. Look at what was said during that interview. She called his film small. She said nobody asked for it. She mocked the director. She suggested he was becoming irrelevant. She implied he was too good for mainstream entertainment in a way meant to insult him. She dismissed the project entirely, saying only 12 people would see it. Every one of those statements was designed to diminish, to make him feel small, to suggest that his carefully considered choices were foolish. And for what? For a reaction, to create a clip that would go viral, to boost ratings. Certainly not to have a genuine discussion about the film, its story, or the artistic choices behind it. She could have asked about the plot, the characters, the motivations that drew him to the director, or the experience of making something intimate and personal. Instead, she spent the entire time questioning his judgment and mocking his vision. Think about it from Bill's perspective. He shows up to promote something he poured months of work into, something deeply meaningful to him. And the person interviewing him spends the entire time telling him it's worthless, that he's wasting his time, that he's becoming irrelevant. How long would anyone sit through that? How many insults could anyone endure before reaching their limit? Bill gave her chances. Multiple times he tried to answer, to explain, to redirect the conversation. Each time he was interrupted, dismissed, or mocked. And finally he made a choice. He decided that his integrity, and the respect due to the work and the people who created it, was more important than staying seated for a humiliating performance disguised as an interview. He walked away, leaving the cameras, the crew, and the audience stunned. In that single act, he reclaimed control, dignity, and the right to prioritize what mattered to him over what made for good television. Bill tried to explain his perspective. He tried to redirect the conversation. He tried to maintain his composure and professionalism, to answer questions with patience and clarity. But Lorraine Kelly just kept pushing, kept criticizing, kept dismissing everything he said. Her questions were no longer questions. They were veiled insults, each one designed to undermine him, to make him doubt his choices. Her tone was relentless, sharp, and uncompromising, leaving Bill little room to defend himself. Finally, he reached his limit. And yet, he didn't erupt. He didn't yell, curse, or throw objects. There was no dramatics, no tantrum. Instead, he did something far harder. He stood up, explained calmly why he was leaving, and walked away. He left with his dignity intact. That takes real strength. The kind of strength that comes from knowing your own worth and recognizing when a situation has turned toxic. To step away from someone clearly uninterested in a real conversation, to protect yourself and the work you care about, requires courage. And Bill had that courage in spades. Bill was absolutely right to leave. What Lorraine was doing wasn't acceptable. It wasn't good television. It wasn't journalism. It wasn't an honest conversation. It was bullying, pure and simple. She used her position as the host, the person with all the power in that dynamic, to attack someone who had come onto her show in good faith, someone who trusted her to treat him fairly, someone who expected basic professional respect. And she violated that trust completely. Think about what she said as he began to leave. "You can't leave. We're in the middle of an interview." As if he was somehow obligated to endure ongoing insults. As if walking away from disrespect was unprofessional. And when he calmly called her out, pointing out that she was attacking him rather than interviewing him, she shrugged and said, "It's good television. Good television." That was all that mattered to her, not truth, not respect, not meaningful conversation. Just a viral, dramatic moment. People are talking about it now, but not in the way she probably expected. What the audience saw was a respected actor being mistreated by a host who equated cruelty with entertainment. They saw someone standing up for himself and the work he believes in, refusing to allow his career, his choices, or his creativity to be belittled for ratings. Consider Bill's final words before leaving. He asked Lorraine, when was the last time she created anything? When was the last time she took a risk on something she believed in, knowing it might fail? When was the last time she put her heart into something that mattered, regardless of popularity or safety? Those questions cut straight to the heart of the issue. It's easy to criticize. It's easy to judge other people's decisions. But creating something meaningful, something personal requires risk, conviction, and courage, the very things she dismissed. Bill has always understood that. Throughout his career, he's made big films and small films, commercial projects and deeply artistic ones. He's worked with first-time directors and legendary auteurs. He's taken risks and followed his instincts. He's built a body of work that is diverse, compelling, and uniquely his own. And yet, during that interview, Lorraine tried to make him feel ashamed of that. She tried to suggest that caring about the story, about the work itself, was foolish or pretentious. But it's neither foolish nor pretentious. It's the most honest choice an artist can make to make decisions based on what matters, not what will earn the most money or attention. Not every film needs to be a blockbuster. Not every project needs millions of viewers. Sometimes the most important work is quiet, personal, intimate, Bill understands that. For him, success is measured not by box office numbers, but by honesty, by the integrity of the story, by whether it resonates with those who experience it, even if that audience is small. Lorraine, however, didn't understand, or maybe she understood perfectly and simply didn't care. Either way, she treated Bill's choices with contempt, dismissing years of careful work and thoughtful artistic decisions. And Bill, recognizing the toxicity and disrespect, did what any professional with dignity would do. He walked away, protecting not only himself but the art he had committed himself to creating. She mocked his priorities. She suggested he was squandering his talent, that caring about anything other than commercial success was somehow a mistake. And when Bill finally had enough of being insulted and walked away, she acted as if he were the one being unprofessional, as if he were overreacting, as if he should have just sat there and endured it. But why should he have? What obligation did he have to remain in a situation where he was being actively disrespected, where his work was belittled, where the person interviewing him had made it clear she had no interest in understanding his perspective? None. Absolutely none. And he made the right choice by leaving. Because here's the truth: when you're a public figure, when you're someone like Bill Nighy, people assume they own you. They believe you owe them your time, your presence, your patience. They expect you to smile, nod, and play along, no matter how you're being treated. But you don't. Nobody does. Everyone deserves respect. Everyone deserves for their work to be taken seriously. Everyone deserves to be in spaces where they're valued, not attacked. And if you're not receiving that, you have every right to walk away. Bill showed the audience that day exactly what setting boundaries looks like. He demonstrated that it's okay to say, "This isn't acceptable," and to remove yourself from people and situations that treat you poorly. He didn't owe Lorraine Kelly anything. Not his time, not his patience, not his willingness to sit there while she tore down something he cared deeply about. So he left, and in doing so, he displayed far more dignity and professionalism than she did throughout the entire interview. Because real professionalism isn't about staying seated no matter what. It's about treating people with respect. It's about asking genuine questions instead of passing judgment. It's about trying to understand rather than trying to provoke. Lorraine failed at all of that. She was so focused on generating drama that she forgot the very basics of what an interview should be: a conversation, an exchange, an opportunity to share or connect. Instead, she turned it into an attack, and Bill refused to participate. Every artist, every creator, every person who puts themselves out there with their work should watch that moment. They should see what Bill Nighy did and learn from it. Because people will try to diminish you. They will question your choices. They will tell you that your work is irrelevant, that you're wasting your time or your talent. They will attempt to make you feel small for caring about things that truly matter to you. And when that happens, you have every right to do exactly what Bill did: stand up, explain why what's happening isn't okay, and walk away with your head held high. That isn't being difficult. That isn't being oversensitive. That's being human. That's having self-respect. That's knowing your worth. And Bill knows his worth. He has spent decades proving it through his work, through the choices he's made, through the performances he's given, through the stories he has helped tell. He doesn't need to justify himself to anyone, least of all to a talk show host who equates commercial success with value. When Lorraine tried to shame him for choosing a meaningful project over a more profitable one, he didn't accept her framework. He didn't buy into the notion that bigger is always better, that popular is automatically more valuable, or that caring about the work itself is naive or foolish. He stood by his choices. He defended his film and the people who made it. And when it became obvious that she had no interest in a real conversation, he walked away. That is what integrity looks like. That is what standing up for yourself and your work looks like. Lorraine should be embarrassed. She had one of Britain's most beloved actors on her show. She had an opportunity to have a meaningful conversation about art, commerce, and the choices actors make over the course of their careers. She could have explored interesting questions, dug into creative decisions, and discussed the value of pursuing personal projects. Instead, she chose mockery over curiosity, judgment over understanding, and creating a viral moment over producing something genuinely worthwhile. And in the end, the viral moment she got wasn't the one she wanted. It wasn't people talking about how she challenged Bill Nighy or asked tough, insightful questions. It was people watching a respected artist refuse to let himself be diminished, refusing to accept disrespect as entertainment, and walking away with his dignity intact. That's the story people are talking about now, and it's the story they'll remember.